Let's now look at this wonderful story of Jacob and Jacob getting married, beginning in chapter 28. It starts off with Isaac confirming and enlarging the blessing that he had given before. He confirms that Jacob is indeed the recipient of God's blessing to Abraham, that he is the primary channel that God is using to bless. Esau sees that Isaac has blessed him with this powerful blessing, and as he sent Jacob away. And he wants a piece of that. He's still trying to curry favor. And he tries to marry a better wife. He sees that the wives that he married were not appropriate, and he wants to get a better wife. And he kind of does it. In completely obedience, he marries an Ishmaelite, not a daughter coming out of Ishmael. Jacob, he's heading out, and he stops at Bethel, about 35 miles away, so he'd be tired after that trip. And it is the same place where God blessed Abraham, and I'm sure he knew it. If we look at the blessing that Jacob receives at Bethel, it was much greater than what the blessing that he had received from Isaac, through Isaac. God confirmed that the Messiah, who uses the seed singular, uses the word seed, but he makes it in the singular tense, which meaning it's this Messiah, not just that it would be multiple people, which is also confirmed, but that the Messiah would come through Jacob, the prophesied one that they've been looking for since Eve, that would indeed bruise the serpent's head, would come through Jacob. Jacob's initial response is a bit of a bargain. It is a bit of a vow. Some people would say that the grammar is such that it's more like since, but most translations translate, if God will be with me and keep me in this way, then the Lord will be my God and I will pay my tithe. Never say if to God. God will always do it. Since is a much better, since God will be with me. Because God will be with me, because he loves me so much, of course he will be my God. Of course I will give him what is due him in my finances. Of course I will follow him completely. We have an interesting thing in the ladder that Jacob saw. That Jacob saw a ladder, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And in John chapter 1:51, Jesus said to him, "Most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven opened, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." So that the ladder is itself a type of Jesus, that access to heaven and access to God is through Jesus. No other way, that through Jesus we have access to God. We have this incredible story of love, deception, and Leah. Jacob had no dowry. He fled without possessions. He had no possessions with it. And so in chapter 29 we see that he went on his journey. He came to the people of the east. And he saw this well, and he saw this beautiful lady who came, and he immediately was attracted to her. Laban, Rebekah's brother, was a scheming trickster. We're going to see that over and over again. He was Jacob's match and then some. But God brought Jacob to Laban's family, and specifically to Rachel. We have Jacob serving for 7 years for Rachel with an agreement. First he hung out for a month, kind of a probationary period. Laban saw, wow, this guy's good. He works hard. He's a good, solid guy. God is blessing him. Even in a month he could tell. And so he wanted Jacob to work for him, and they made this bargain. Okay, work for 7 years for Rachel. Laban, of course, tricked him with Leah. Remember that in those days they had the veils. They didn't have the same type of lighting that we have now. And they had a massive feast. To be honest, Jacob was probably fairly drunk. And so Laban was able to trick him with marrying Leah instead of Rachel and sleeping with her. Leah is the innocent victim in much of this, and it's hard not to really feel for her and feel her pain, feel that she is not loved in the same way as Rachel was. God blessed Leah in very many ways, but it's hard not to feel sorry for her and have a real feeling for her. Jacob indeed fulfilled marriage with Leah, and he got Rachel as well immediately right after that week, but he agreed in advance to work for Laban for 7 more years. So he got both right away, but he had to work 7 more years. Starting off, Rachel was barren, and it was a while before she had any kids. Leah had sons immediately. And then each of them got into this thing where it was a thing back and forth, and they gave Jacob their handmaiden to have even more kids. So they had the wives, multiple wives. They had this thing going back and forth between them. It is interesting because polygamy is not condemned in Scripture. It's just reported on, but it's never a good thing. It's never something that works out well. There's always problems with it. And indeed, in the New Testament, it's talking about the requirements for an elder. It says, husband of one wife. One wife is enough. That it was always a problem between the two. But God used that situation. And indeed, he used the situation to give us the entire 12 tribes. We have all the 12 tribes. I've got them listed here with the names of the wives or the handmaidens. And it's interesting because we often hear about the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. But we'll see later on that there were actually, depending on how you count them, 13 or 14 tribes, because Joseph's sons were adopted by Jacob, that Jacob claimed them for his own. And so we have this greater list of 13 or 14 names that we can draw from, and it is fascinating to see throughout Scripture that it's always 12, but they choose different portions of names to make it be 12 out of this larger group. Each of the names has a meaning, and we'll see those meanings play out in the way that those tribes interact with each other and with the people around them. During this time of Jacob serving Laban, Jacob became very, very rich. He served Laban for 14 years combined for the 2 wives, and he served Laban for an additional 6 years because we're told that he was there for 20 years. And during that time, and especially during the last 6, when he was working for himself and took wages of his flocks, Jacob became stinking rich. Laban liked having him work. God was blessing Laban through Jacob. But it wasn't enough. Laban and Laban's sons were concerned because they saw just how much Jacob was getting, and they became jealous. Jacob wanted to be able to easily tell whose sheep were whose. They start off and it's, okay, whose are whose? Let's keep these flocks separate. So he moved 3 days away, and he made sure that if the sheep were not ideal, if they weren't one solid color, if they were speckled and marked and had marks on them, that would be Jacob's sheep, and the solid ones would be Laban's and his sons. Now Jacob had a scheme. He was scheming. He was trying to make it so that the stronger sheep would not be solid colors. And we have this thing of him setting rods and things before the sheep as they were mating, that the stronger ones would see these rods and become speckled. Well, we know enough about genetics. It was God that made it happen. It was God who blessed Jacob during this time. It was not man's scheme, even though man was trying to scheme, but God who was blessing. And thus the man became exceedingly prosperous. He had large flocks, female and male servants, and camels and donkeys. So Jacob, during this time, he was multiplying sheep. He would then sell the sheep and sell the wool and sell different things. And he became exceedingly prosperous in lots of different ways. After a while, it became time to go home. Overall, he served for 20 years, and he became very rich, and his sons became very jealous. As Laban was trying to latch on to the richness that was happening to Jacob, he changed his wages over and over again. We learned that he changed them 10 times. But God was smarter than Laban. Jacob and Laban were both schemers. They were both people that were, a bit of a dealer and a schemer. But God is smarter than any of them, and God was going to have his own way. After a while, though, it was time to go. And you see 3 different things that Jacob wanted to go home. He wanted to see his parents. In particular, the situation was getting worse around him, worse and worse. And specifically, most importantly, God told him it was time. God told him to go. And note that he said, I am the God of Bethel, telling him to go in that direction even. But in the process of going, we have this interesting side story of Rachel. Rachel, the one that was desired. Rachel, the one that was unique. And the way that she was a thief, that she stole Laban's household idols. Now, these would undoubtedly have been worth something. They would be made of various precious things. But we also know that they were very important to Laban. That Laban used these idols in very particular ways. And indeed, chapter 30, verse 27, we see that I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. Well, if you look at the word experience there, it's actually learned by experience in divining or in enchantments, that it is specifically that he has learned by using these household idols. And so he wanted them to have these. He wanted to have these household idols because he used them in his own rituals. It was important to him. Now Laban couldn't prove who stole the idols, and so he was not able to prove that Rachel had stolen them. And indeed, Rachel used some subterfuge to keep them from searching at the time. Jacob and company, they were probably about 3 days away when they started out for home. It took Laban 7 days to catch up to them because they were moving and Laban was moving. And Laban was moving right along as fast as he probably could, but it took them 7 days to catch up to them. God protected Jacob and company. Laban was coming out furious. He was mad. He had his gods stolen, and God protected Jacob and company by sending a dream to Laban. It is interesting how God can use dreams. It's interesting indeed in this modern time, God has been sending many dreams to people of Islam, that God has been speaking to them and revealing his gospel to people that could see it and could get a hold of it in no other way. God can use dreams. Jacob didn't know who had taken the idols. he was willing to have him be killed. He was willing. He thought he was completely innocent, and so Jacob was saying to Laban, "Hey, whoever took them, you can take them and kill them. This would be a horrible thing. I recognize it's a horrible thing, so you can take them." But God protected Rachel, which is awesome. The bottom line, though, is that it's best to not have gods that can be stolen. If you can't steal someone's God, that's a powerful, good God. But if there are things in your life that are that important to you, if there are things acting as gods, I don't care whether it's money or a car or a house or looking good, it's better to not have things that are that important to you that can be stolen. And we have this parting between Laban and Jacob, which sounds pretty nice and sounds interesting, but it actually has a negative connotation if you know it, and that's this whole mitzvah. That may the Lord watch between you and me when we are absent one from another. And so it seems like, oh, what a sweet thing to say. Well, it was actually a negative connotation, more like, hey, God watch over you and keep you honest, you dirty dog, because I can't watch over you. So God is witness. God watch over you and keep you honest. And so then they split and left from one another.